Tonight, a quiet story from a river town, long ago, about the one warm night of the year when everyone hangs up a wish. An old woman and her small granddaughter, and a slip of paper. The little girl could not think what to write on. On the warmest, softest night of the summer, when the sky stayed light long after supper, and the air smelled of the river and of warm dust cooling, the whole town came out of its houses to hang up its wishes. It was the one night of the year for it. All that week, every house had been cutting slips of coloured paper, red and blue and green and yellow, and writing a wish on each. And now, in the long blue dusk, they were all walking down toward the river to tie them to the great bamboo, the way the town had done on this night for hundreds of years. Hannah walked between them, holding her grandmother's hand. She was small, and this was the first year she had been let to write her own wish. Always before, grandmother had written one for her, had asked her what she wanted, and made the marks, and let her tie it on. But this year, grandmother had given her a slip of paper of her very own, a soft yellow one, and a little brush, and had said in no particular hurry that Hannah could write whatever she liked on it, whenever she thought of it, any time before they reached the river. Her own wish, in her own hand. And Hannah could not think of a single thing. She held the yellow paper carefully in her two hands as she walked, so as not to crease it. And she thought and thought, and nothing came. A wish seemed to her a very large and important thing, the one wish of the whole year. And she did not want to waste it on something small, and she could not think of anything big enough. And the paper stayed blank and yellow and empty in her hands. The lanterns were coming on along the lane as they walked, one by one, soft and gold in the blue evening. And Hannah looked down at her empty paper and worried, just a little, that she would reach the river with nothing written on it at all. The lane down to the river was full and warm and slow. Little stalls had been set up along both sides, each lit with its own small lantern, and the smell of the festival was everywhere. Sweet things cooking, hot oil, river water, the green smell of cut bamboo. People moved along easily in their summer robes, in no hurry, the children darting and the old ones taking their time, everyone drifting the same way, down toward the water. All along the lane there were places to write your wish, if you hadn't yet. Little tables set with brushes and ink and bowls of paper slips. And Hannah watched the others writing theirs. A boy beside her wrote, in big, sure strokes, that he wished to grow up tall and strong. A young woman wrote something Hannah couldn't see, smiling to herself as she did. An old man wrote a long wish all the way down his slip, careful and slow. Everyone, it seemed to Hannah, knew exactly what they wanted. Their wishes were bright and big and certain, and they tied them up or carried them on toward the river. And Hannah's own paper stayed empty in her hands. She thought she ought to wish for something grand, To be very clever, perhaps, or very pretty, or a wish that would last her whole life long. But none of the big, bright wishes felt like hers when she tried them on, and the trying only made the paper feel emptier than before. Grandmother did not ask her what she was writing. She did not hurry her, or help her, or tell her what to want. She only held Hannah's hand and walked, slow and easy, looking at the lanterns and the stalls and the people with a quiet gladness, as though the walking itself, the warm lane, the gold lights, the whole town out together in the soft dark, were already most of the point. Now and then she pressed Hannah's hand a little, for no reason, just to have it there. And Hannah held her empty paper, and walked, and looked, and waited for her wish to come. Where the lane bent toward the water, there was a quieter place, out of the thick of the crowd, and Grandmother stopped there a moment to rest, and drew Hannah in beside her. She told her, quietly, the way you tell a thing that matters, that she had hung a wish on the great bamboo by this river every year of her life. Every single year. And the very first time, she said, she had been just about Hannah's size, and could not write yet either, and had held her own grandmother's hand on this same lane, in this same lantern light, on a night exactly like this one. Hannah looked up at her. It was hard to think of Grandmother as small, but Grandmother said it had been so, that she had stood where Hannah stood now, with a slip of paper held in her two hands, and an old warm hand holding hers. The same lanterns coming on, the same river smell, the same great bamboo waiting down at the water, with its 1,000 wishes swaying. Her grandmother had brought her, just as her grandmother had been brought, back and back, further than anyone could remember. The town had been coming down to this river on this night, she said, since long before she was born, and would go on coming long after. Every summer, the lanterns, the paper, the bamboo by the water. She did not make a lesson of it. She only told it, looking down the lane at the light, her hand warm around Hannah's, and then she said it was time they went down to the water, and they went on. But something in it stayed with Hannah as they walked. All those grandmothers and all those small girls, year after year, hand in hand down this same warm lane to this same river, so many of them, going back so far. It was a very large thought, and a warm one, and it did something to the empty paper in her hands that she could not yet have put into words. And then the lane opened out, and there was the river, and there was the great bamboo. It stood on the bank at the water's edge, a single huge stalk of bamboo, cut and raised and taller than the tallest house, and it was hung from the ground to its high green tip with paper. 1,000 wishes and 1,000 more, red and blue and green and gold and white, tied all up and down it and along every branch, so many that the bamboo seemed to be wearing them. Dressed head to foot in the whole town's hopes. And the warm night wind came up off the river and moved through it. And all those 1,000 papers lifted and turned and rustled at once. A soft, dry whispering. The sound of all the wishes stirring together. And the lantern light ran gold over them as they moved. Hannah stood and looked up at it. And it was so big, and there were so many, that for a moment she forgot her own empty paper altogether. Out over the dark water the first fireflies were coming out. One, and then another, and then more. Small, cool gold sparks lifting slow off the bank and drifting out across the river, winking on and off, low and unhurried, as though the wishes had sent up little lights of their own. The whole place glowed, soft and gold and alive. The lanterns, the fireflies, the 1,000 swaying papers, the dark shine of the moving water, and the people came down quietly to the foot of the bamboo and reached up and tied their wishes on, here and there, wherever there was room, adding theirs to all the rest, and stood back and looked up, the lantern light on their faces. And here and there among the big, bright wishes, when she looked closely, Hannah saw small ones too, plain wishes, low down where little children had reached, in marks even rougher than her own. One near her, tied low on a branch, wished only for someone's old dog to get well. One wished for noodles for supper. One, in a careful child's hand, wished only that next summer would be as good as this one. None of them were grand in the least, and Hannah, reading them, stopped trying so hard to think of something big, for it turned out a wish did not have to be big at all. It could be small and plain and near, and still be tied up here on the bamboo with all the rest. Grandmother brought Hannah in close to the great bamboo, under the swaying papers, where the rustling was all around them, soft as rain, and the fireflies drifted near, and she let the little girl just stand there a while and be inside it. It was there, standing in under the rustling bamboo, the fireflies drifting close, her grandmother's hand warm in hers, that Hannah knew all at once what she wanted to wish for. It was not a big wish. It was not clever or grand or the kind that is meant to last your whole life. It was only this: the warm lane and the lanterns coming on and the smell of the river and the great bamboo whispering its 1,000 wishes, and grandmother's hand around hers. She wished to have this again, to come back to this river, on this night, next year, and the year after that, and do exactly this, with exactly grandmother, just like this. That was all. That was her whole wish. She knew it was the right one the moment she thought of it. The way you know a thing fits. So she knelt down at the low table by the foot of the bamboo and took up the little brush. Careful, the tip of her tongue between her teeth. her soft yellow paper, in her own small, careful marks. She wrote her wish down, slowly, the way grandmother had shown her. And it was hers, in her own hand, at last. Then grandmother lifted her up, because the good places were high, and Hannah reached up into the swaying papers and tied her yellow slip onto a branch of the great bamboo, among all the 1,000 others, knotting it the way grandmother showed her so it would hold. And grandmother tied hers just beside it, her own wish, that she had carried ready all evening on a slip of red. She did not say what hers was, and Hannah did not ask. But the two papers, the yellow and the red, settled side by side on the same branch and lifted and turned together in the warm wind, the way the two of them had come down the lane together. And Hannah thought that was exactly right. They stood back from the bamboo then, the two of them, and looked up at it together. Hannah tried to find her own paper among all the others, and could not. It was in there. She knew just which branch, but it had become one of the 1,000 now, one small yellow slip among all the reds and blues and greens, swaying with the rest, no bigger and no brighter than any other. And she found she did not mind at all that she couldn't pick it out. She liked it better that she couldn't. Her one small wish was up there with everyone's, held in among all of them, part of the whole great rustling bamboo, part of this night, and all the nights before it, and all the ones still to come. The fireflies drifted. The papers whispered. The river went by, dark and slow and patient, the way it had gone by on this night for hundreds of years, and would go by for hundreds more. And Hannah stood in the warm dark with her hand in her grandmother's hand, small and not small, one little girl among the whole town, one warm night among all the warm nights, her yellow wish swaying somewhere up there with all the rest, and she was in no hurry at all for the night to end. Grandmother pressed her hand, just to have it there, and the two of them stayed a while longer by the river, under the 1,000 swaying wishes, in no hurry to go, while the lanterns burned gold, and the fireflies rose, and the great bamboo whispered all its hopes softly over the moving water. The lanterns burning low and gold along the river, the 1,000 wishes swaying on the great bamboo, the yellow slip and the red one turning side by side somewhere up among them, the fireflies rising slow off the dark water, and the old woman and the little girl standing quiet at the river's edge, hand in hand, in no hurry to go, on the warm night that comes round, kind and the same, year after year after year. Tonight, a quiet story from a clearing deep in the woods, long ago, about a charcoal burner, his old dog, and the long, patient night they sat up together, tending a slow fire that could not be hurried. By the time the dark came down on the forest, Jacob's mound was lit and smoking, and the long night's watch had begun. He had spent the last 3 days building it, there in the clearing where he built one every year, stacking the cut wood up into a great round dome, layer on careful layer, taller than a man, and then covering the whole of it over with earth and turf and old charcoal dust until it was a smooth, dark hill with not a stick of wood showing. And that morning he had set a slow fire down through a hole in the top of it into its very heart, and then closed the hole most of the way over. And now the great covered mound stood in the clearing in the falling dark, smoking quietly from its top and its sides, beginning the long, slow change that would take it all the night. For that was the whole secret of charcoal, and the whole of Jacob's craft. You could not hurry it. The wood packed inside the mound was not to burn, not with open flame, never with flame, but only to smoulder, slow and close and starved of air, all through the night and more, until it turned from wood into charcoal, light and black and clean. Let it catch into open flame, and it would burn itself up to useless grey ash, and the 3 days building and the nights watching all be for nothing. Keep it slow and sealed and smouldering, and by morning it would come good. And the only way to keep it slow was to sit up with it the whole night and tend it. So Jacob settled in to do just that, as he had every working year of his life. He had his little hut at the edge of the clearing, and his own small watchfire before it. A proper fire, this one, for his warmth and his kettle. And he had his long-handled spade leaned ready against the hut, and a heap of loose earth beside it. And he had old Bruno, his dog, who came and turned around 3 times and lay down by the fire with a groan very like his master's. The forest stood black and close all around the clearing. The first stars were coming out in the gap of sky above it. And in the middle of it all sat the great dark smoking mound, beginning its slow night's work, with Jacob to keep it. There was nowhere he had to be, and nothing he had to do, but this: to sit up through the dark and tend the slow burn, and not hurry it, until the morning came. The early part of the night was the busiest, for the mound was new lit and lively, and wanted watching. Every little while, Jacob got up from his fire and took up a lantern and walked a slow round of the mound, all the way round it, reading it as he went. And what he read was the smoke, for the smoke told him everything. Thin and blue and lazy, drifting up gentle from all over the dome. That was good. That was the slow smoulder doing its quiet work. And he walked on past it, satisfied. But a thread of smoke gone quick and white and hard from one spot. Or worse, a little red glow showing through somewhere. That meant the fire had found air there and was trying to wake up into flame and had to be put back down. He had read smoke this way for 40 years, since he was a boy at his own father's mound, and he read it now without thinking, the way you read a face you have known all your life. He knew this mound as he knew them all, knew where it would try to break through and where it would sit quiet. And he walked his rounds in the lantern light, through the early dark, patient and unhurried, watching the slow blue smoke rise off it into the night, and was content. The forest kept him company in its way. An owl called, off in the dark trees, and another answered it. Small things rustled in the leaves at the clearing's edge and went still. Once, the soft, careful steps of something larger, a deer perhaps, or a fox, moved along the far side of the clearing and were gone. Jakob minded none of it. The forest at night was his, as much as it was anyone's, after all these years. He was easy in it, the only waking man for miles. Alone but for his dog and his mound and the slow blue smoke. And he would not have traded the deep quiet dark of it for any warm bed in any town. He walked his round and came back to his fire and sat and watched the mound and waited for the night to deepen. Around the middle of the evening, the mound tried to break out, the way they always did, and Jakob put it back to sleep. He was on his round when he saw it. Low down on the far side of the dome, a little jet of smoke had gone quick and white, and just below it, a small red eye of glow had opened, where the earth covering had cracked and let the air in. 40 years ago, a glow like that might have made his heart jump. Now it did not. It was the most ordinary thing in the world, and he knew exactly what to do, and he did it without the least hurry. He took up his spade. He cut a little loose earth from the heap he kept ready for just this, and he laid it over the cracked place, gently, not slapping it on but settling it, and pressed it down with the back of the spade, sealing the air out, smothering the glow, closing the mound up smooth again. The white smoke thinned and slowed and went blue once more. The red eye dimmed and shut. The fire, denied its air, sank back down into the slow, deep smoulder it was meant to be, there in the dark heart of the mound, and went quietly on with its proper patient work. That was all it took. A spadeful of earth, a steady hand, and the knowing where to look. Jakob stood a moment and watched the spot, to be sure it held. It held. He patted the earth down once more, and took up his lantern, and walked on round the rest of his quiet mound under the stars, and went back to his fire. Bruno lifted his head and asked with his eyebrows whether anything was the matter, was told with a hand laid on his head that nothing in the world was, and put his nose back down and went to sleep. And then the night settled, and the mound settled with it, and the deep, quiet middle of the night came on. After the lively early hours, the mound had found its slow, steady smoulder at last, and wanted less of him now. Only the odd round, the odd small patch, and so Jakob could sit longer by his fire, and let the deep night simply be what it was. It was very quiet now, and very dark. The kind of dark and quiet you only get deep in a forest in the small hours, with the nearest other soul miles off and asleep. The watchfire burned low and red. The mound breathed its thin blue smoke up into the dark, slow and even, a great patient sleeping thing. Above the clearing, the stars had wheeled round and thickened, hard and bright in the gap of sky over the black trees. The cold had come down, the real cold of the small hours, and Jakob fed his own fire and warmed his hands at it, and made tea in his blackened kettle, and drank it slow. And old Bruno pressed warm against his leg. And the two of them sat there together, in the one small ring of firelight in all that dark forest, and were, in their plain way, perfectly content. He thought about very little, on nights like this. That was half of why he loved them. There was nothing to decide, and nothing to chase, and nowhere to be. There was only the mound to mind, and the fire to feed, and the long, slow hours to sit through. And a man's mind, given all that quiet and nothing it must do, simply went still, went as slow and easy and untroubled as the blue smoke rising off the mound. He sat and watched it rise, and was not bored, and was not lonely, and did not want the night to be over. Some men could never have borne it. The long, dark, solitary hours. Jakob had spent a whole working life learning that they were, for him, the best hours there were. The fire ticked. The mound smouldered. The stars turned slowly over the black trees, and the night wore on toward morning at its own unhurried pace, and Jakob kept his patient watch. And all the while, unseen, inside the dark mound, the slow change was happening. He could not see it, but he knew it, the way he knew everything about his craft, that down there in the sealed dark, hour by patient hour, the wood was becoming charcoal. Not quickly, not all at once. There was no moment you could point to and say, there, now it has changed. There was only the long, slow, steady smoulder, all night long, working its way inward through the stacked wood, turning it bit by bit from heavy raw wood into something light and black and clean. A slow becoming that could happen no faster than it happened, and could not be forced, and could not be skipped, and would not come at all, unless a man was willing to sit up the whole night through and keep it slow. That was the heart of it, Jakob had always thought, in his wordless way, that the good of the charcoal was made in the dark, slowly, while the world slept, by someone simply sitting up and being patient with it. You could not stand over it and make it hurry. You could only tend it and keep it slow and wait and trust that the slow, dark work was doing itself, hour by hour, the way it always had. And in the morning, when the cooled mound was opened, there it would be. The night's long patience turned solid and black and good in your two hands. He fed his fire. He walked one more slow round under the paling stars. The smoke was thinner now and bluer than it had been, and there was a smell to it he knew of old. The clean, sharp smell that came near the end, and by it he knew that the burn was coming good, the way it always did for a man who sat up and let it take its time. Away in the east, beyond the black trees, the sky had gone the faintest grey. Morning came to the forest slowly, the way it does. The grey in the east turned a pale gold, and the light came down soft and slow through the high trees into the clearing, and a few early birds began, far off and gentle. The stars went out one by one, and the great mound stood low and dark, and almost done in the new light, smoking only the faintest thread of blue now. Its long night's work all but finished. Jakob got up, stiff from the long sitting, and stood and looked at it in the soft dawn. His mound that he had built for 3 days and watched for 1 whole night. And he knew, without opening it, that it had come good. He could read it in the colour of the last smoke and the smell of it, and 40 years of mornings exactly like this one. The burn was made. Down in the cooling dark of the mound, where he could not yet see it, the wood had all become charcoal, light and black and clean, the way it had every year, because he had sat up and kept it slow and not hurried it, and let the long dark do its patient work. And now, at last, he could sleep. The mound was made and safe, sealed and slow. It would only cool now, all through the coming day, and needed nothing more from him. The long watch was over, and well over, and there was nothing left in the world he had to do but rest. So Jakob banked his little fire down to embers, and went into his hut at the edge of the clearing, and lay down on the bed of dry fern there with his coat pulled over him, bone-tired and deeply content, the good black charcoal making itself in the cooling mound a few steps away. Bruno came in and circled once, and lay down warm against him. The soft grey gold light grew slowly in the clearing. The few far birds sang on, gentle and unhurried. And the charcoal burner, his long, faithful night behind him, and the slow work come good, closed his eyes in the quiet dawn, and let the deep patience of it carry him, at last, down into sleep. The great mound low and quiet now in the soft dawn, its last thin smoke drifting up blue and faint, cooling slow all day toward the good black charcoal within, the watchfire down to warm grey embers, the spade leaned by the hut, the man and his old dog lying warm together in the little hut, the long patient night behind them, sinking down into well-earned sleep as the gentle light comes up through the trees. The slow good work made, as it can only be made, in the dark, and all in its own unhurried time. Tonight, a warm story from an old workshop where bells were made, about an old master, the boy he had taught for years, and the night he let him pour the new bell himself, and the long, warm dark they sat out together, waiting for it to cool. Late at night, in the old workshop where the bells were made, the metal was nearly ready, and the whole place glowed with the light of the fire. The great melting fire stood in the middle of the floor, banked up hot and red, and in the heart of it, the bronze was melting, the copper and the tin together, going from hard, dull metal to a thick, bright liquid, slow, over the long evening, until now it sat in its great pot in the fire, glowing the colour of the sun. Everything in the workshop took its light from that fire. The dark beams overhead, the racks of tools, the old brick of the walls, the faces of the two who stood waiting. All of it washed warm and gold and red by the glow. And beyond the reach of it, the rest of the workshop fell away into a soft, warm dark. It was very hot and very still, and full of the low roar of the fire and the slow, steady breath of the bellows that fed it. In a corner, well back from the heat, the workshop cat slept on a sack, untroubled, as it slept every night. In the floor, near the fire, was the mould. It was buried, sunk down into a pit in the earth of the floor, and packed round tight with sand, with only its open top showing at floor level, a dark, round mouth waiting to be filled. Down inside it, hidden in the ground, was the shape of the bell. The hollow form of it, built up of clay over the long weeks, every line and curve of the bell to be held in the dark of the packed earth, waiting now for the metal to come and make it real. Old Anton, the master, stood by the fire and watched the metal, the way he had watched it on hundreds of nights across a long life of making bells. And beside him stood the boy, Bram, who had been his apprentice for years, who had swept this floor and carried this metal and worked these bellows and watched this master pour bell after bell, learning it all with his eyes and his hands, a little more each time. Bram thought, as he always did, that he was here tonight to help, and to watch, and to hand the master what he needed. He did not yet know that tonight was to be different. For tonight the master meant to let the boy pour. He had taught him for years, slow and patient, the way the old crafts are taught, not in words mostly, but by showing, and by letting the boy do a little more each season as his hands grew ready. Bram had begun by sweeping and carrying. Then he had been let to feed the fire, and then to help build the moulds, and then, last year, to mix the metal. And the master had watched him all that time, more closely than the boy ever knew, watched his hands and his patience and the care he took and the way he never rushed the thing in front of him, and had decided, quietly, some while ago, that the boy was ready and that the next bell would be his to pour. He had not told him. He was not a man for announcements, and he knew too that a thing told too far ahead only grows heavy with the waiting. So he had said nothing, and let the evening come on like any evening, and let the boy think he was only there to help. Until now, with the metal glowing ready in the fire, and the mold open and waiting in the floor, when the master simply turned to him and put the long pouring ladle into his hands and said, in his low, even voice, "You pour it tonight." Bram looked at him. For a moment he did not understand, and then he did, and his breath caught. He pour it. The real bell, the bronze, the thing you could not take back or do again, pour it himself. He looked at the master to see if he truly meant it, and the master looked back at him, calm as the deep night, and did not take the ladle away. "You're ready," the old man said. "I've watched you. Go on." And he stepped back. Actually stepped back, half a pace, out of the place beside the mold where he had stood to pour every bell of his long life, and left the place open for the boy to step into. And the boy, after a moment, with his heart loud and his hands very careful, stepped into it. Then the boy poured the bell. He did it the way he had watched it done 100 times, and the way his hands, it turned out, already knew. He brought the great pot of metal up from the fire, the master there to help him with the weight of it, but the boy guiding it, the boy in charge of it now, and he tipped it, slow and steady, over the open mouth of the mold. And the bronze ran out. It ran out of the lip of the pot in a thick, bright rope of liquid fire, the color of the sun itself, almost too bright to look at, and it ran down into the dark mouth of the mold and was gone, pouring away into the hidden shape of the bell below the floor. The light of it filled the whole workshop, brighter than the fire. A great soft gold flare thrown up the walls and across the dark beams and over the two faces bent above the pour. It was the most beautiful thing the boy had ever seen. The metal ran like liquid sun, smooth and certain, down into the earth, filling the hidden bell, and the heat of it came up into his face, and he held the pour steady and even, and did not let his hands shake, because the master had taught him not to, and because the master's hand had come to rest, just then, on his shoulder, light and steady and sure. The master said almost nothing. Once, low, steady, and once, good. Keep it coming. And that was all, because that was all the boy needed. The metal poured and filled, and the mold took all of it. Every drop of the bright bronze running down into the dark to fill the shape that had waited weeks for it. And then the pot was empty, and the boy tipped it back upright, and the pour was done. The bright rope of fire stopped. The great flare of light sank back. And there, in the floor, the round mouth of the mold stood full to the top with bronze, glowing, settling, ticking very faintly as it stood. The bell poured and made, and needing now only to cool. It was done, and it was good. The boy stood and looked at the full mold, his face still hot from it, his breath only now catching up with him. and a feeling rose in him that he had no name for. Not quite pride, though there was pride in it, but something larger and quieter. The feeling of having done, with his own 2 hands, a real thing. A thing that would last. A thing that could not be undone, and had not needed to be. The master looked at the full mould too, and then he looked at the boy, which, in truth, he had been doing more than watching the metal all along. And he nodded, once, slow, and said, "That's a good paw." From the old master, who did not give his praise lightly, that was a very great deal. Then he covered the top of the mould over against the cold night air, to let the bell cool slow and even in its bed of earth, the way a bell must be let to cool, with no hurry at all, for that is the whole secret of it. Cooled slow and patient. Down there in the dark, the bronze comes out whole and true, and will ring clear for hundreds of years. And then there was nothing more to do but wait. The work was finished. The pour was poured. The bell was made. It had only to cool now, slowly, down in the dark earth, all through the night. And that could not be hurried, and ought not to be. So the 2 of them, the old master and the boy who was a bell maker now, banked the great fire down low for the night, and drew 2 stools up near the warm, covered mould, and sat down together to wait out the long night while the new bell cooled. And it was a good night to sit out. The workshop was warm. It would stay warm all night, with the banked fire and the great cooling bell giving off their heat into the dark room. And it was quiet now. The roar of the fire sunk to a soft red murmur. The bellows still. The night settled deep and close around the small glow of the 2 of them. Outside, the town slept. In here, they sat by the warm mould in the low light and waited. And there was nowhere either of them had to be but here. They did not talk much. They never had needed to. But somewhere in the deep of the night, the master, looking into the coals, told the boy, quietly, the way you tell a thing across a fire late at night, about his own first pour 50 years before, how his own master had stood behind him then with a hand on his shoulder, the very same as he had stood tonight, and how that man had been taught the same way by another before him, back and back, a long line of hands passing the craft down, one trusted boy at a time, all the way to this boy, here, tonight. The bell they had poured was only the newest in a long line of bells going back further than any of them could count, and the boy was only the newest in a long line of makers. And there was a deep, warm comfort in that, in being one more careful pair of hands in a long chain of them, and the boy felt it settle quietly into him as he sat there in the warm. And below them, all the while, in the dark earth under the floor, the new bell cooled. They could not see it. It was hidden, the way it had been hidden all along, taking its shape in the dark. But they could feel its warmth coming up through the floor, and now and then hear it tick, very faint, as the bronze drew slowly in on itself and hardened and became, hour by hour, a bell. A real bell that would be lifted out into the light in the morning and hung in its tower, and would ring out over the valley for longer than any of them would live. The night wore slowly down toward morning. The fire sank to a bed of soft red coals, and the warmth held, and the boy's eyes grew heavy, and once or twice his head nodded. The master told him, low, to sleep if he wanted. There was no need for them both to watch. But the boy did not want to sleep. He wanted to sit out the whole of it. This first night, beside the first bell that was truly his, with the master there beside him. And so he stayed awake, warm and tired and content, and watched the coals, and felt the warm bell cooling under the floor, and was, without quite having the word for it, happy. Toward the very end of the night, when the first grey light began to come in at the high windows, and the first birds started up outside, the master reached over and put his hand once more on the boy's shoulder, not to steady him this time, for there was nothing left to do, but only to leave it there a moment, the way you do with someone you are glad of. And the boy understood from it, without a word said, that he had done well, and that he was trusted, and that in this one warm night he had crossed quietly over from the boy who watched to the man who made. They sat on as the light came up, the two of them, by the warm dying fire and the cooling bell, in no hurry to move, while the workshop filled slowly with the soft grey of the dawn, and the new bell rested, made and whole, and very nearly cool now, in the dark, warm earth below, waiting for the morning, and the lifting, and the long, bright life of ringing that was to come. The workshop warm and dim and quiet, the fire sunk to soft red coals, the old master and the boy who was a maker now sitting on beside the cooling bell, the first grey light at the high windows, the first birds in the dark outside, and the new bell resting whole in the warm dark earth below, poured by careful, trusted hands, waiting only for the morning to lift it up into the light and ring.